Hello viewers, welcome. Today we are going to read chapter 5 Bores written by E.V. Lucas. So let's get started. Now about this essay. Carrying an unmistakable stamp of Lucas art, Bores is a fine example of reformist purpose hidden behind a mask of gentle humor and playfulness. Bores thrives, Lucas stresses on the kindness of human nature. Even notorious Bores can be sure of a tolerant, if not exactly sympathetic audience, because all of us hesitate to say truthfully that we find our companion boring. Now let's read this original essay. It requires a sense of superiority, assurance, and self confidence to write about bores at all, except as one of them. But since your true bore is always unconscious of his boorishness, and indeed usually thinks of himself as the most companionable of men, to write as a one of them is to acquit oneself of the stigma. Now, nevertheless, at some time, I fear everybody is a bore because everybody now and again has a fixed idea to impart, to present, and the fixed idea of the few are the boredom of many. Also, even the least self centered men can now and then have a personal experience sufficiently odd to lose its true proportions and force him to inflict it overmuch on others. But Bohr's rules are always Bohr's. For egotism is beyond question the Bohr's foundation stone. His belief being that what interests him and involves himself as a central figure must interest you. Since he lives all the time and all the time, something is happening in which he is a central figure and he has always something new to discourse upon himself, his house, his garden, himself, his wife, his children, himself, his car, his handicap, himself, his health, his ancestry, himself, the strange way in which, without inviting them to, all kinds of people confide in him and ask his advice. His humorous way with waiters, his immunity from influenza, his travels, the instinct which always lead him to the best restaurant, his cloth, his dentist, his freedom from Shibboleth, his being one of those men who look upon the open air as the best church, his possible ignorance of the arts, but his certitude as to what he himself likes, his triumph over the income tax people. These are the happy men, this world's excel trees. Now, I have been referring to boards exclusively as a man. Whether that it quite just, I am not sure, but I shall leave it there. Now, boards are happy largely because they have so much to tell and come so well out of it, but chiefly because they can find some people to tell it so. The tragedy is they can always find their listeners. Me almost first. And why can they? Why can even notorious bores always be sure of an audience? The answer is the ineradicable kindness of human nature. Few men are strong enough to say, for heaven's sake, go away, you weary me. Bores makes a coward of us all, and we are left either to listen and endure or to take refuge in craven flight. We see them in distance and turn down side street or hasten from the room. One man I know has a compact with a peg boy whose duty it is whenever my friend is attacked by certain bores in the club to hasten up and say he is wanted on telephone. And ingenious device, but it must not be worked too upon because my friend, though he can stoop to deceit and subterfuge, would not for anything let the boss think that he was avoiding him, would not bring the grief to that complacent candid face, for it is one of the board's greatest assets that he has a simplicity that disarms. Astute, crafty men are seldom bores. Very busy men are seldom bores. Of all bores, the most repellent specimen is the one who comes close of the button holding bores. This is the kind described by a friend of mine with a vivid sense of phrase as the man who spreads birdlime all over you. A bore who keeps a reasonable way off can be dealt with, but when they lean on you, you are done. It is a worst when they fix your eyes only a foot away and tell a funny story that isn't funny. Nothing is so humiliating as to counterfeit laughter at the bidding of war, but we do it. The incurable weakness and benignancy of human nature comes again. Then there is the bore who begins a funny story, and although you tell him you have heard it, doesn't stop. What should be done with him? Another of the worst type of bores is the man who says, where should we without our sense of humor? He is even capable of saying, nothing but my unfailing sense of humor saved me. There is always the man who says, live and let live, as my poor dear father used to say. There was once an eccentric peer, I forgot both his name and the place where I read about him, who had contracted all unconsciously the habit of thinking aloud and is the this world of artifice where society is cemented and sustained very largely by compromise between what we think and what we say. His thoughts were very often in variance with his words. One of the stories in memoirs in which I found him describes how he met an acquaintance in St. James Street, and after muttering quite audibly to himself for a few minutes as they walked side by side, confound it, what a nuisance meeting this fellow. I have always disliked him. But now that we have met, I suppose I must ask him to dinner. He stopped and said with every appearance of cordiality, you will dine with us this evening, won't you? Well, as a sheet of armor plate against boards, I don't think we could do much better than cultivate this habit of thinking truthfully aloud. Unless we can do this or train ourselves to be downright offensive, there is no remedy against bores except total evasion. No boss ever says, after no matter how many hints, I will avoid that man in future. I know I bore him. So they will always flourish. But if a certain famous weekly humorous paper was to cease publication, distasteful and incredible thought, there would automatically be a decrease in both topics because then no one could any longer repeat those sayings of his children which are good enough for punch. So thank you so much.